Good evening. How's everyone doing? We're back. Wicked Women had a little bit of a break. I'm afraid there's been some stuff on my side which is not making my life incredibly easy. My mum is quite poorly, and she has a condition which is quite scary. So I have been round there quite a lot, running between two homes, and I've had to take a break because I am pretty tired, as is my sister. But we're here, and it's nice to be back. I need to put my glasses on to see everybody in the comments. Let me have a look. Listen, welcome everyone, wherever you're watching us from, whether you're watching us live from coming in from South London, or wherever you're, what time you're watching it, wherever you're in the world, you are most welcome. Interesting show tonight. We've had a bit of a change around with our topics because our brilliant show with Charlie Hall, which is coming later on down the line, because Charlie was taken ill with that terrible virus that is going around. So literally, we've had to sort of like shuffle it around. But we have a great show tonight, and it's, I've got to put my glasses on. It's just me tonight. You've just got me. This is my first time on Wicked Women going solo. So welcome. Just want to say hello to everybody that's joining me. It's really, really nice to see so many people here. And, you know, a couple of years ago, I never would have thought that I would ever do this on my own. But hey, a good subject to go with. When I was little, one of my favorite tales, and I don't know who told it to me, where I heard it from, was about the Titanic. And that's the thing I've noticed. Guys in America tend to call it Titanic, where the Brits actually call it the Titanic, because she was the ship. Thank you, Steve. And literally, I loved this story. I mean, as it has, it's captured the heart of so many people around the world. Because, you know, we've all heard the stories, we've watched the movies, we've read the books. But it's an incredible story. And tonight, what we're actually looking at, because here on Wicked Women, we like to look at the women, or people that made a difference, that's for sure. And you know, we're talking about love that actually stayed, you know, those that chose to stay behind on the Titanic. And I've got my notes down. That's why I've got the glasses on. Huckleberry's just around there somewhere. If you see movement, that's from him. So let's have a look at the Titanic. Let's just look at some of the facts to begin with, because before the story of the Titanic, there's the ship. Let's have a look at the story of the ship. So I have actually been to Belfast quite a few times, luckily, and I have actually seen where she was built, and it was amazing. I mean, it's huge. Compared to the ships they're building today, obviously not as big, but it was huge. And feel free if people want to come on and join me, by the way. So she was built in Belfast, and I'm going to get this right. She was 46,328 tons. Pretty big girl. She was 175 foot in height and 883 feet long. I mean, that is huge. And she was worth, in today's money, 159.93 million pounds, which works out about $215 million. So you're talking about this, this was the pride of the White Star Line. People, she was called the ship of dreams, and she would never sink. She was unsinkable. And you kind of wonder that when you name a ship after the gods, especially the Titan gods, you are really pushing your luck. She was launched in 1911, and sadly, by April 1912, she sat at the bottom of the ocean. She was the largest ship at the time that anyone had ever seen. And it wasn't just about engineering and all the good bits that went with it. It was a statement. It was like she was powerful. You had money. People believe that, when you were on the Titanic, it was a status. Over 2,200 people stepped on board. First class, because back then they're still talking the classes: first class, second class, and third. And you all had, it was a story of wealth and hope and people hoping to survive, because people would have saved up so much money to go on the Titanic. You wanted to leave England, leave Ireland, start a brand new life in America or Canada. This was your chance to do it. In fact, I was listening to a very interesting podcast about her today, and how they were saying that in third class, you had buckets as toilets. I mean, that just kind of says it all, really, doesn't it, how they saw you? So the Titanic isn't one story. It's the story of many, many people. And on the night of April the 14th, 1912, just before midnight, she struck an iceberg. And I mean, there was a lot of hype on this ship. There was a fire on her as she came out of port. There had been a few engine issues. There was a lot of pressure on Captain Smith that he was going to get the ship into New York early, and it was he actually took this ship on. It was the last one he was going to do, the last job he was going to do before he retired, because obviously if he was going to retire, it was going to be, what a way to go. And obviously he was paid incredibly well for it. So it was his last ship as well. And so when they hit the iceberg, there was no panic to begin with, no immediate danger, because, not being funny, why would there? She's unsinkable. But slowly, because she's made of iron, and obviously she could, I think it was 4 decks, I think she could take, but it went to deck 5 and then up, and then she couldn't stay on board. And sadly, not enough lifeboats on board for all the people on, there's not enough lifeboats. They're not going to live. And they didn't think they needed them. Plus they thought it looked ugly. So you got to remember, when she hit that iceberg in April, you're talking that the temperature of the Atlantic was below freezing. So if you ended up in that water, you didn't have very long to live. Minutes, maybe, not hours. She took 2 hours and 40 minutes to sink. 2 hours and 40 minutes. Can you imagine the panic and fear and emotion on that ship, watching people you're leaving behind, or people that got left behind? Because down in third class, they were less likely to survive because they were locked in. They were not allowed upstairs in first class and second class. They were kept below, so all the gates were locked, so they couldn't get out. So they were like getting a lot of first class passengers into the boat. 2 hours, 40 minutes before you know you're going to die, and you're going to die in an incredibly painful way. and 1,500 lives were lost. And there was no survival rates, because, you know, the what does they call it? The cable, you know, he was doing SOS right to the last minute. And there were no ships near her at all. They even sent up rockets, looked like fireworks, people celebrating. Nobody came. There was nobody near. So it depended where you were on the ship mattered. If you were on the top, if you were on the middle, that was really good. If you were downstairs in third class, you're not going to survive. And first class women were more likely to survive, because back then there was a policy about women and children first. And that was, you know, very much the gentlemanly, and no, women and children first. And if you were a third class passenger and a woman and child, you were still unlikely to survive. And it wasn't just a disaster, it's also a reflection of the world at the time that she sank. And in the middle of all of this, while there's the cold, you know, confusion, what's going on, who's going to live, who's going to survive, what can we do? Can we get off on this boat? How do we get out of here? There were moments where people had to make decisions. Are we going to stay, or are we going to take our chances, or are we going to get on a boat? Personally, I'm terrified of boats, but I can't imagine being out there and literally being told you've got to leave your loved one behind. That would have. I'm not sure I would have the strength to do that. Women were told to leave, and mostly they did, with their jewels in their pockets, and a few small dogs who were lucky enough to be taken off. And there were women who were on the deck who chose to stay. And that's where our story comes from tonight. The women that chose to stay on that deck, for whatever reason, they chose that they knew they were going to die. And there's a power in that. There's a power in choosing how you're going to die and how you're going to leave this world. Now, they didn't have that choice of how, but they chose that moment where this is my moment. And I think, as I said in the promo, at that moment when you hit, you know, when disaster strikes, where the worst thing happens, it reveals who people truly are. And that's what we are. We're looking at a few people tonight, some of the women who chose to stay behind. And I can't even imagine how they did that, because at the end of the day, wow. The first lady I'm going to look at, and I've got some pictures here. Let's bring up some lovely pictures. I'm sure all of you over the years have looked at Titanic in the movie, and let's have a look at her. Let's bring her up. So everyone's seen this famous picture of her. She was absolutely stunning. And I remember a couple of years ago when they actually got out the what do they call it? When they blow the horns, they actually got them out and they allowed them to play them once. That's all they could do for them to survive. And this is how she looked. She was absolutely beautiful. And we're going to look at this lovely lady here. Let's bring up her picture. Now, she's quite well known. And I'm just bringing up her notes here that I've written down. What have I done with it? Because she chose to stay behind with her husband, Ida Strauss, the lovely Ida Strauss. Let's bring up her story. Let's take that off a second. So Ida Strauss, her story is quite well known, and most of these stories that I'm going to tell you tonight about the women that stayed are about love. It's all to do with love. And Ida Strauss is one of them, and her story is quite well known. She wasn't a young woman, and she was a wife, a mother, and a woman who'd already had a really, really full life. Her and her husband, Isidore Strauss, were co-owners of Macy's. and they had a lot of wealth and status. And more importantly, they were absolutely mad about one another. When the Titanic struck, let's bring up her picture again so you can see her. When the Titanic struck the iceberg, there was still time for some people to escape. And she was offered that chance. And she was escorted towards a lifeboat because there was a seat waiting for her. But there was one condition: she would have to leave her husband behind. Now, can you imagine that? You are told that you can get on, you're going to live. There's a seat for you on condition you leave your husband behind. And in that moment, you've got minutes, to make a decision. Do you stay or do you go? And that's where this lovely lady chose. And at that time, everyone's thinking about survival. How are we going to survive? How are we going to live through this? And fear can drive people to do some crazy things that they never ever thought they would do. But Ida decided to do something really extraordinary. She is said to have turned to her husband and said, "Where you go, I go." And when urged to save herself again and to think of her children, to take the seat that so many would have pushed her out of the way and fought for, she simply said, "I will not be separated from my husband. As we have lived, so we will die together." I mean, that is the moment that you really take the power of your life in your hand. And also, it shows how much you love someone, because people talk about how much they love someone, don't they? "Oh, I love you. I'll walk through fire for you. I'll go through hell and back for you." Love is just a word, and people talk very, very easily about love. But actually, what she was doing, she was sacrificing her life to be with her love. As she said, "I will be not separated from my husband. As we've lived, so we will die together." And she chose. She absolutely chose. And she stepped away from the lifeboat. She removed her fur coat and she gave it to her maid. And she knew she wasn't going to need that. And that's what gets me about it. She gave her coat so that someone else would be warm and they would live. And she wasn't panicking. She was accepting, "I'm going to die, and I choose to die with my husband." Witnesses later said that two of them were last seen sitting side by side on a deck chair, holding each other. I can't believe the power of that woman. What a brave woman. And she was not going to leave her husband come hind or hair. She was going to stay. And they died together. And as the ship went down, we often talk about how many people survived the Titanic and how many, didn't. But Ida's story reminds us that this shows how powerful at that moment these people showed and revealed who they truly were, how they felt about their partners, how they felt about their life. She didn't choose death. When we were talking about her, she didn't choose death. She chose love. She chose to be with her husband. That is love for you. She was loyal. She loved him. She chose not to leave. But she saved someone else as well in that moment. She saved her maid's life. And in doing so, they have become immortal. And her story will live on forever because she's not a victim. She's a woman who stood in the face of the unthinkable and said, "I'm going to stay." And that's why when I look at these two people, I think to myself, what an amazing love story. What an amazing story. So that's the story. It's the story of one of our lovely women who chose to stay. And I wonder how many people would do that. I wonder how many people in today's world, given the same scenario that they were in, would decide to stay, would give up their seat to someone else and say, "I don't need it, you have it, I'm staying." I wonder how many people really would. When we talk about loving someone, it's all words. Actions always speak louder than words. And I've always said that, anyone can say I love you, but it's actions that show it all. And in that moment, she chose to stay with her loved one. She was in totally in her power. God rest her soul. So the next woman we're going to look at, another amazing woman. I think I've got the right picture here. Let's bring her up. I'm trying to find out who we've got here. Let's see who I think I have found. Actually, no, I'm going to talk about this lovely lady, because this lovely lady, I believe, is Anne Isham. And I'm just going to check that, because I'm sure that's Anne Isham, because this is the story that always breaks my heart when I read this. Yes, this is her. This is Anne Isham. Let's bring her up again. There she is. Isn't she gorgeous? And this was her beautiful Great Dane dog that she took on board the Titanic. She was born in 1862 in Chicago. Let's bring him off a second. She was from America, and she was a first-class passenger. Very wealthy family, educated, independent, and by all accounts, a woman who did everything on her own terms. And she came onto the Titanic alone, because unlike many others at that time period, and thinking going back to 1912, she didn't have a husband. I mean, that was frowned on. She didn't have a husband, no children, just herself. That's how much she was in her own power. And she was known to have a large Great Dane with her on board, who was her companion, not a pet, her companion. And she loved that dog. He was obviously, let me just remind you, there were actually 12, I believe. I'll find my paper with all my notes here. I've got all my papers here, because there's so much to tell you about the lovely Titanic. And I wrote this all down today so I could tell you. There were 12 dogs on board the Titanic. There were 4 roosters, 4 hens, 30 cockerels, and a yellow canary, and possibly the ship cat Jenny. They're not actually sure if Jenny actually got off before she sunk with her kittens. They're not sure on that. But one of those 12 dogs was Anne's Great Dane. And obviously, as I say, she got on board on her own. And you imagine that in 1912, all the about a woman coming on her own with a dog. But when the Titanic was sinking, she was offered a place on a lifeboat because she was first class, obviously moneyed. And it was women and children first. And she was offered a place on a lifeboat. But there was one problem. She wasn't allowed to take her dog. And obviously him being a big dog, because some women actually did take a couple of dogs off because they were small enough to hide. She wasn't allowed to take her dog. So imagine being on that ship. Chaos is going all around you. People are crying and screaming, and voices are being raised. There is panic. Reality is beginning to set in that most of you are going to die and you're going to drown, or worse. And she's told, you can go, but the one thing you love has to stay behind on their own. And she refused. And I have to say, I would have done exactly the same thing. I would have been scared witless, but I would have done exactly the same thing, because she loved this dog more than anything. This wasn't just her pet. This was her baby. This was her companion. They were devoted to one another. And Anne decided that she was not going to leave her baby behind, and she was going to make that decision. She would not abandon her dog. And I wonder how many people would absolutely have left their animal behind. I think a lot of people, if they're honest, would leave their animal behind, because they at that moment comes into a power as a person. It's me or them. And so at that moment, they would probably leave them behind. A lot of people would. But Anne wasn't like that. She's not going to abandon her dog. And there are accounts, although unconfirmed, but deeply persistent as time has gone on, of accounts that have been left, that she was seen on the deck with her dog as the ship prepared to go under. And one haunting story suggests or report that her body was later recovered with her arms wrapped around the animal she refused to leave. That breaks my heart, because she knew he was going to die, and he would have been terrified, I would imagine, like most of them were, because they actually did go and one of the crew members actually went down below and opened the gate so that dogs could get out, unlike somebody who chose to leave their dog in the room, and the dog was so terrified it bit and ripped the coat, begging them to take them, because animals know when something's about to happen like that, and they left them behind in his room. But Anne didn't do that. She took her dog with her. She made a choice. And in a moment where survival was everything, and it was everyone for their own, in the end, she chose loyalty. She chose to stay with her dog. And she became part of the story of Titanic, although a quieter story. Not just someone who lived her life the way that she chose to, she also chose how she was going to die in the same way. And love comes in whatever form. Love is not just in human form, it's in many different forms. The love of your cat, your dog, your horse, whatever your animal is, it comes in different forms. And she chose love. And that to me is like, how many of you guys actually in the comments, you can say it very easy right now because we're talking about it, but how many of you would actually stay behind with your animals? How many would you leave them behind? So there's the story of Anne Elizabeth Isham. Now we're going to talk about this other lovely lady. Let's bring her in. And I've got to find my little story for her. This is Edith Course, I believe, Evans. And this is another lady. I mean, you know, what I'm loving about these women, although they sadly lost their lives, they were powerhouses. They lived their life the way they wanted and chose to. And they also parted this planet the same way. So Edith Course Evans was an American socialite. She was traveling first class with her friend Caroline Brown. And Edith was known to be a very generous woman. She was very kind. She had a quiet sense of being, you know, with a dignity. And she chose, let me just bring off that picture. She decided to stay behind on the ship as well. And when the lifeboats were being filled, Edith and her friend made their way to the deck because obviously they were in first class, so they would have been right at the front of everything. And there was space, but not enough for both of them. Can you imagine that? You're with your closest friend and there's only space for one. How many people would give up that space for their friend? Because you say you're best friends, you say you're close friends, but in that moment, how many of you would give up your seat for your close friends? It's easy to say it now, but you're looking at that cold sea knowing you're going to drown and your lungs are probably going to explode. So how many people would absolutely do it? So there wasn't enough room. So Caroline Brown was placed into the lifeboat and Edith was right behind her. And for a moment, it looked like she might follow, but she hesitated. Whether it was confusion, timing, or simply the chaos of that night. Just wondering what my little man's doing. The chaos of that night. The opportunity went by, and in that moment, she made a decision. She stepped back and allowed her friend to go ahead on her own. Caroline Brown survived. Edith, of course, Evans did not. And just in that moment, I mean, you just knew when you're like, you go, you take it. Just a very, very quick action. She gave up her place. And that's what makes her story so powerful. These were powerful women. These weren't women that were just like, you know, they took death by the hand. Let's bring up a picture again so you can see her. They took death by the hand. They took the life by both hands, and they were like, no, I'm going to choose. It wasn't about refusing to leave. It was about choosing that someone else should live in your place instead. And in a moment where every second counted, Edith chose selflessness, and she did not choose to survive. She chose to stay, and she saved another woman's life. Now, isn't that very similar to Ida? Ida chose to stay with her husband, and she saved another woman's life as well. So I admire these women so much because they chose their destiny. And to me, that at that moment is so important. So just looking at these three women alone that we've looked at today, they are all first-class passengers. They've all got money. They are all independent women. They were all right up at the front to get a seat. By now, third class is desperately trying to get out, and they can't. They can't get out because they're locked, so they're having to smash their way out. But there was one woman who decided to stay. And if you ever saw the film Titanic, there is a scene in that film where a mother is putting her two children to bed and reading them a story. And it's a similar, I think they based it very much on the lady that I'm about to talk about now. And I actually don't have a picture of her, but I'm going to tell you about Bess Waldo Allison. She was 25 years old. So, I mean, you think you're 25 back then. We see that, you know, now as young. Back then, it was like, no, you're middle-aged. She was 25 years old. She was a young wife. She was a mother of two small children. And she was traveling, yet again, first class with her husband, Hudson, great name, Hudson Allison, and their baby daughter, Lorraine, and their young son, Trevor. They were the sort of family that you looked at them and you thought, well, you've got everything. You're a family of substance. You're a family with a future. You know, you've got the whole world's waiting for you. And then the Titanic struck the iceberg. And in the confusion, the baby daughter, Lorraine, was taken to a lifeboat by her nurse, Alice Cleaver. But Bess didn't know that. She was obviously panicking because all she knew that her baby was missing. So at that moment, she was like, where's my baby? Where's my child? Lifeboats at this point are now being lowered. Women are being urged to get in. And she was given the chance to leave. And she said no. Another lady that chose, she said no, because no one can tell me where my child is. And I'm not leaving without my baby. There was no chance of survival for her or the baby, sadly. So she stayed on that ship with her husband and their son, waiting, searching and hoping, because, you know, people were being told there's a ship coming. You know, we've sent out messages to other ships, and the Carpathia, that was the ship that actually came along, would not reach them at any time soon. So this lovely family chose to stay behind, believing that their daughter was still on board somewhere. Bess Waldo Allison became the only first-class woman to die in the sinking of the Titanic. Wow, the only first-class woman. And when you hear that, she didn't choose to stay out of defiance. She didn't stay because of her husband. She stayed because she was looking for her child. a mother's love is that powerful. And in that moment, nothing else mattered. It didn't care what was going on. She was going to find her baby. She didn't realize that her baby was already on a boat and was being rowed away. She chose not to leave because somewhere in that ship, she believed her child still needed her. And that's the kind of love. When you have love like that, fear, you can't negotiate with it. So when we're looking at these stories of these women, it's about women that made choices about love. They chose to stay because they didn't want to leave behind husband, dog. They let 2 other women survive because of them, and they wanted to find their child as well. I find the whole story really, really sad. I mean, how many people watching and listening, how many people, how old were you when you first discovered the Titanic and the stories? Because everyone hears about the unsinkable Molly Brown, and people like the Rich and John was it John Jason Astor, somewhere like that. They all they all had lots of money, and they turned up and they were on the ship for a good time, and they sadly all went down to the bottom of the Atlantic with it. So for me, it was like, I've always wanted to go to see the Titanic. Yeah, I've always wanted to be above it. I would never, ever go down in something to look at it, although I'm sure that's quite amazing to see it. I would prefer to have looked at, to look at, and just be above it and just to pick up the moment of there. But for me, Steve's quite right when he says sacrifice must be one of the most powerful expressions of real love. Because love does involve a choice, and these all these women had it. So what I was looking at when I was doing the story of these women, I'm just going to bring up a little picture here. Where are we? Here we go. It's just my mouse. There we go. We have a little family here. This is the lovely Charlotte Collier with her daughter. Now, believe it or not, Charlotte actually comes from my area. She comes from Leatherhead in Surrey, which is about 20 minutes, half hour's drive from me. And she wasn't wealthy. She wasn't part of high society. She lived an ordinary life in England with her family. She was a working woman, a wife and a mother, raising her a young daughter, Marjorie, with her husband, Harvey Collier. And like so many families at that time, they wanted to leave England. They wanted to have a brand new start, a brand new beginning, and they wanted to live the dream. And the Titanic at that point was the dream. She was the dream. Let's take them off here. So I was looking at this story of them and writing with some notes here, and she wanted a better opportunity, better stability, and a better future for her daughter. So they made the decision to leave England and emigrate to America. America's always been the dream country, hasn't it? It's always been the country of dreams. You can do it in America, baby. Come to America, baby. And all those people that saved up all their money and sacrificed and left everything behind, they believed they were about to live the dream, not realizing it would be their worst nightmare. So this wasn't just a journey about, on a boat and going to America. This was a massive thing for them. They were changing their lives. And so in April 1912, they boarded the Titanic as second-class passengers, not in luxury, but second class. And they were traveling together as a family, lots of dreams, lots of plans, and a future waiting for them at the end of the journey on the other side of the ocean, the land of dreams being America. But that future is never going to be as they imagined it. When the Titanic first struck the iceberg, there was a lot of confusion. What's going on? Or she's not going to sink. We're perfectly fine. Go back to bed. Put some light. And then it was like, put some life jackets on. There was so much confusion because, even the crew didn't even really know what was going on. And Charlotte and her husband were among those people completely not knowing what was happening, very, very confused. And then came the warning. You got to move. It's urgent. Put your life jacket on. Charlotte, Harvey, and little Marjorie, they made their way along the deck, and it was freezing. So you would have, as soon as you got up that deck, that ice cold Atlantic air would have hit you. And there would have been so many pushing and shoving and so many, I imagine, screaming and crying. And like so many others, they were faced with the rule that would divide their family, women and children first. The husband's got to stay behind. And she didn't want to leave him. Charlotte didn't want to go because she didn't want to leave the man she loved. But she hesitated and she stayed near her husband because you don't walk away from the person you love, especially in that moment. But her husband knew, sadly, what she didn't want to accept was the fact that he wasn't going to live and she had a chance to survive. And that is what love is all about, isn't it? Is saving the person you love. So he told her, go. This is your only chance. And the next minute, she was put in a lifeboat. Not because she was chose to, but because she was told to by her husband, who obviously wanted her and their daughter to survive. She was placed into a lifeboat and she watched the ship. She watched the lights and the distance grow between her and the man she loved. Harvey Collier did not survive. His body was never recovered. Charlotte did. Let's bring up that lovely picture of her again. She did survive. She was rescued by the Carpathia. She made it to New York. She lived, and so did her daughter, Marjorie. But obviously life had changed for them in that awful moment. They were on their own. She was now a widow and a single mother in a strange country and don't forget, in that moment when that ship sunk, not only did she lose her family and her husband, she lost everything they were taking with them. Most of the money, any personal items, clothes, furniture, anything you were taking, it's gone. She arrived in America with nothing. She did remarry many years later. She stayed her life in America, but she was never the same after the Titanic sank. She was never the same woman. She was haunted by the fact that he had said, you're going to live, you've got to get in that boat. And I think there's a guilt there in all of these people that got on the boat and they had to leave their other half or their family behind. There's a terrible guilt that you've got to live with for the rest of your life. I survived, they didn't. And whether they didn't survive because the cold or whatever the reason, when someone dies and they save you or they make sure that you live and they didn't, there's a guilt there, So she, for the rest of her life, she carried a lot of anxious. There was a lot of grief. She never actually gave up feeling the grief and guilty that she survived, although she was glad, obviously, her daughter did. But she left her husband behind. So she obviously came from Leatherhead in Surrey, as I say, which is literally about 20 minutes by car from me. And it was quite interesting. And I asked the lovely Carleen to get some photographs for me, of which she did, of some of the stories of the survivors of Titanic who are in Virginia, and then obviously the ones that came back to England. And can you imagine that, being on a ship and watching people you love and all your money and all your goods gone, and yet so you got to go back to England. Some of you chose to have to go back to England, which would involve getting on another boat. I'm not sure about you guys, but I don't think I'd want to get on another boat so soon. I think I would never want to get on another boat. I'd be like, no. And you had no option. You had no choice. And I think for a lot of the women that did survive Titanic, there was a lot of guilt. There was a lot of people I could have chosen to talk about tonight, but I wanted to talk about these women because these are all women that lived and died. They all had a life. They all married. They had a family. They laughed and cried just like we did. And at the moment of when tragedy hit, and it came home to them that they were not going to survive, they decided that they chose to stay behind. And in some other people's cases, they were told to go and leave behind the ones that they actually love. And this beautiful ship is now at the bottom of the ocean. This is just part of the ship you can see here. And obviously, this beautiful ship is not going to be around much longer. I mean, people have always said to me, what would you do about the Titanic? Would you raise her? Is she like a graveyard? And I kind of argue with that, because I actually would, if it was possible, I actually would have brought her up, because I think it would be nice to bring them all home, or at least, what's left. Because she's, the pressure of the water and all the different micro little, I can't remember how they pronounce it now, but all the little things eating away at the iron, she's not going to survive much longer. And I remember watching that film years ago, Raise the Titanic, and I was thinking, that what an amazing movie. Can't we do that? Can't we just stick a gigantic balloon underneath her and bring her up? But the truth is, she's in 2 different parts, and they'd have to bring them up one at a time. It's interesting. There is a boat, or should I say a ship, in Portsmouth in dry dock called the Mary Rose. When she sank, she's one of Henry VIII's favorite ships. When she sank on her side, and they managed to have got one side up. And I mean, bearing in mind she's been down there hundreds of years, they've managed to get one side up. The other side is still down, and they want to get that up as well. And I wonder that I don't think we'll ever see Titanic out of there at all, because I think the thing is, most people think it's a graveyard. What do you guys think? I'm asking you in the comments. What do you think? Do you think we should bring the Titanic up if you could, or would you leave her there? There was one woman on all of these ships, because Titanic had 2 sister ships. There were the Olympic and the Britannic, and there's lots of conspiracy theories there about who actually, what ship actually did go down. Was it Titanic, or was it Britannic? Now, the Olympic actually was around, and the Britannic was around for a lot longer. Sadly, the Titanic was the flagship of the White Star. And there's one woman who I wanted just to bring up, because she is a survivor, very, very strong woman. She has more guts than I have. I think one ship sinking would be enough for me never to ever want to go on another. Violet Constance Jessup, born in 1887. She was an Irish-Argentine ocean line stewardess, and she also was a nurse in the early 20th century. She survived both the sinking of the RMS Titanic in 1912, and also the sister ship HMHS Britannic in 1916, as well as being abroad the eldest of the 3 ships of that class, the RMS Olympic, when it collided with the British warship HMS Hawke in 1911. So this is a woman. She's been on all of these ships and she don't care. She's going back on them. So let's have a look at some of her story. When she went on the Titanic as a stewardess on the 10th of April, 1912, she was 24. 4 days later, it sank, as we know. She described that in her memoirs, how she was ordered up onto the deck and to serve as an example of how to behave for the non-English speakers who could not follow the instructions given to them. She watched as the crew put the lifeboats into the ocean, and she was ordered into lifeboat 16. And as the boat was being loaded, Titanic 6 officer James Moody gave her a baby to look after. The next morning, Jessica and the rest of the survivors were rescued by the RMS Carpathia and taken to New York City. And according to Jessica, the baby's mother grabbed the baby she was holding and ran off crying without saying a word. After arriving in New York City, she then went back to Southampton, where she then went on to the Britannic, I believe. Let's have a look at that because we got the other 2 ships as well. So the Olympic, let's look at that one. Actually, let's start with the Olympic. In 1911, she began working as a stewardess, obviously for the White Star liner, on the Olympic. And the Olympic was a luxury ship, the largest civilian liner at the time. And she was on board it when it left, yet again, Southampton, and collided with the British warship HMS Hawke. There were no fatalities, thankfully, and despite damage, the ship limped back and returned to port unaided. Amazing. She never discussed that collision in her memoirs, and she continued to work on the Olympic until April 1912, when she was transferred to its sister ship, Titanic. So she's already been on one Olympic, which survived. Then she goes on Titanic, which sadly didn't. And then we come to the last one, the HMHS Britannic. So in the First World War, Jessup was a stewardess with nursing duties for the British Red Cross. And on the morning of the 21st of November, 1916, being on the youngest ship, the Britannic, the younger sister, the younger sister of Titanic Olympic. She was on it when it sank in the Aegean Sea, if I pronounced that rightly, after being a German naval mine, when a German naval mine was detonated. The Britannic sank within 55 minutes, killing 30 of the 1,066 people aboard. When Britannic was sinking, Jessup and other passengers were nearly killed by the ship's propeller that were shredding lifeboats that had collided with them. My God. And you know how big those propellers were, right? Jessup had to jump out of her lifeboat, resulting in a traumatic head injury, of which she thankfully survived. In her memoirs, she described the scene she witnessed as Britannic went under. The white pride of the ocean's medical world dipped her head a little, then a little lower and still lower. All the deck machinery fell into the sea like a child's toy. Then she took a fearful plunge, her stern rearing hundreds of feet into the air, just like Titanic, until with a final roar, she disappeared into the depths. 2 other Titanic survivors, Arthur John Priest and Archie Jewell, were also aboard and both survived. Now, that's amazing. That woman was on all 3 ships and survived. I mean, talk about the gift of the gods, survived all 3 sinkings. And that's why I wanted to bring in her story, because as much as we're talking about the women that chose to stay behind, there was also women that had no option but to be strong and come back and maybe work again on another ship, or have to come back to England because they didn't have any other money. in America. So these aren't weak women. They are women who were in those impossible moments. They chose strength, love, and dignity. I'll just have a quick drink. And I think that this is obviously, we've just passed another anniversary of the Titanic sinking last week. And I think there was a lovely little moment where I saw in Belfast, they sent drones out in the shape of the Titanic, leaving the dock, and then they just disintegrated. And I just thought it was a beautiful way to do it. I hope you've enjoyed this episode about women who were incredibly strong at that moment. They made choices, powerful choices, in a world where at that moment women weren't given many choices. In 1912, women were still fighting for so many rights. And over 100 years later, we're still talking their stories. We're still speaking their names, because that's how we've always passed stories down, through talking, through sharing, round the fire. Now, because everything's done through social media. And how powerful are their stories that we're still talking about them? They're not gone. They didn't die. They are still with us through their stories, because their stories do matter. And their voices echo of their determination to leave of their own accord, to give up their seat, or to survive no matter how bad things have been, to still going. And I think it's really important that you can imagine being in those boats, watching the Titanic go down, sounding very similar to the Britannic. The ocean becomes very quiet after the ship has gone down. No music, no lights. You're in pitch darkness. There are no voice. There would have been a lot of screaming when the ship first went down. A lot of screaming, a lot of people asking for you to come back. And some of the boats didn't go back. They were too frightened of being swamped and being pulled down. And those people were asking them to go back. And I think there was only one or two that actually went back and found a few survivors. And I think of the lady with her dog. What was her name? She says, looking for it on all her papers. What's her name? I just had it here just now. Going back and seeing her with her arms around her dog. Powerful, powerful stuff. But you know what? Titanic will live forever. Sadly, as you know, with the Titan accident that happened, or disaster, there was always an accident waiting to happen, let's be honest. There is now 2 stories of people losing their lives on that particular part of the ocean, surrounded by the Titanic. This ship calls people to come and see it all the time. This ship will never die. The story of the Titanic will never die. People will be drawn to this ship forever. And these people's stories will live forever. So they never die. They are immortal, like the Titanic is immortal. I know there were stories or rumors of somebody building Titanic 2, exactly the same, but a bigger version. Whether that's lucky to actually do that, I don't actually know. But the Titanic, I must bring up that amazing picture, which I actually did find, because I think it's just so powerful. Here we go. When you see this, it's just an amazing, someone obviously got a little looking down on it there. She may rest on the ocean floor, but the people and the choices, the love, the sacrifices, they never really sank at all. They live on forever, along with her story. And if they call it a disaster, it'll always be called a disaster, the ship that couldn't sink. But actually, it's a moment where humanity revealed itself to be, sacrifice, truth, love, power. And maybe that's why even now we still talk about this story, not because of how it ended, but because of how they chose to, how these lovely, strong, amazing women decided to choose how to end their life and to face it head on. And I just think, you know, I take my hat off to them, because I'm not sure I could do that. I know that if it had been me and Huckleberry on board, I would be on that ship. If it had been me and Vamp on board, I'd still be on that ship. I wouldn't have come off. And I also think if I was with my sister or etc., and there was just one seat available, I wouldn't have. I think neither of us would have taken it. I think we would have chosen to stay together. So we have not just remembered them we're not just remembered the Titanic, we've remembered the women tonight. And I hope when you leave tonight, you remember these women's name. Ida Strauss, who chose love over life, refusing to leave her husband's side even when she had the chance to leave him. Anne Isham, that was her name, who would not abandon her dog, because for her, loyalty was not negotiable. And then Bess Allison, a mother who, in the panic and confusion of everything, chose in the chaos to stay behind with her husband to look for her daughter, who had already been saved on a lifeboat. And Edith Evans, who stepped back and gave her place in a lifeboat to another woman. And Charlotte Collier, who lived but carried that night with her forever. Different women, different choices, different moments, but each one of them deeply human. This is not the story just about this beautiful ship. It's a story about the people that were on board, how immortal they are, how strong they are. And we must never, ever forget them. And we must pass that moment down, because, you know, as I say to you, when you leave this show tonight and you think about this, in those moments when there are no rules and time is about to run out and there are no guarantees, what would you do? Would you have left your family behind? Would you have stayed with your family? Would you have stayed with your animals? Would you have left them behind? But remember the women that did stay, because love doesn't end when things get rough. It endures, as these women did, and we will carry them with us. I hope you've really enjoyed this little episode tonight. It is I wanted to just share the story of Titanic and these amazing women, and the animals, of course, as well. The animals, for me, I'm a big animal lover, and for me, let me just bring up, most of those animals did not survive. There was a few small animals that were taken in a pocket. I mean, we're talking little tiny Pekingese, etc., that were hidden in the jacket. But if you'd had a Basset Hound or a Great Dane or a dog that was bigger, a Labrador, etc., your dog was going to be left behind. And I think I would have done exactly the same as Lovely Anne did. So I really hope that you've enjoyed this. Thank you as well for being here tonight and supporting Wicked Women. I know it's been a while since we've been here. I have had, as I say, to take some time off. Sometimes I think if I can be here, I will be here. And if I can't, look out for any notices. We have a great show actually coming up next week. Let's actually just bring that up while I'm doing that. I'm just reading your comments. Thank you so much, Carlene, and thank you, Holt. Thank you, Barbara. Much appreciated. And also doing it on my own. It's like, wow, thank you guys. It means a lot to me. Let's have a look what's coming up. So obviously tonight was The Love That Stayed. We have a really great show coming up next week. The Sin of Being Female. Very important topic. We are going to change Wicked Women slightly. I've been talking about these changes for a while. Not only the look of it, but also some of our topics. We've not been a political show. We've tried to stay away from politics, But there are subjects that we cannot ignore, and women are being affected by them. So we will be discussing these topics coming up, always with respect, but still talking about them. And one is the sin of being female, and that will show itself next week. The following week after that, we have This Country, My Dog. And I'm sure you've seen a lot in the news lately of how it was on the BBC News. Are we being too friendly to our dogs? Our dogs being allowed in? You know, all of a sudden, from being we are a dog-loving country. We'll always be a dog-loving country. There seems to be an agenda to reduce our ability to have dogs, and also over in America and other such countries as well. So a very interesting show to look at that. And then we come up to the week after that, and we have the lovely Haunt Me If You Can, which is with the lovely Charlie Hall. And that will be an amazing show because, as I said, she was ill, but she will be here. She is the co-host of a new show that is coming to YouTube. Not so much like Most Haunted, but has aspects of it, called Haunt Me If You Can. It looks quite exciting, actually. So I'm very thrilled to have her. So as I say, the sin of being female, My Country, This Country, My Dog, and Haunt Me If You Can are the shows that are coming up in the next couple of weeks. And I do want to change things up. Val has been gone a while now. She's not been too well. Hopefully one day she'll return. We're always looking forward for when she does. But in the meantime, the show's got to go on. Michael has been amazing of filling it in and helping us out here as well. So, but it's important that Wicked Women carries on, and the message carries on, because that's what we're here for. We're a podcast for women by women, with lovely you gentlemen joining us and giving us your point of view as well. I actually don't know any more notifications after that. I would hope that in time Robertson will come back. It does depend, because my whole life at the moment is topsy-turvy. I am running between two homes, trying to take care of my mum, and it's not easy at all. It's very stressful, it's exhausting, and it's affecting my own health as well as emotionally watching my mum going through what she's going through. But to be here tonight, I wanted to do the story, especially being the anniversary week, has been amazing, and to say thank you to so much to everybody that has come along tonight and supported myself. I hope you guys have a wonderful week, wherever you are, and whenever you watch this. Please come back, like, share, and subscribe, because then you get lots of notifications. You can find us on Wicked Women 888 on Facebook and Instagram and TikTok, and also you can find us on Wicked Women 888, as you know, if you're watching us on YouTube. So thanks, guys. Thanks very much. Thank you to everybody. Thank you, darling. Thank you to everybody for joining us. I'm just reading some of the comments quickly. Bless your hearts. Please send out lots of prayers for my mum. She is 89 years of age, and she's an absolute force of nature who is struggling. Just briefly, so you can understand this, I may actually look at doing a show in this in the future as well, because apparently 1 million people are being affected by this condition. So my mum has glaucoma and she has cataracts. And how it works is, when you can't see properly, when your vision is compromised, and my mum only has 30% vision now, the brain can't cope with it. So it sends down hallucinations. It sends in visions to try and cope with the fact that it's not seeing anything. And these hallucinations are incredibly scary. They can range from being monsters in your face, or leaning over your bed, or seeing people in your bed, or in your house, or outside in your garden. And if you don't know what's going on, you can actually feel like you're going absolutely crazy. It's a very, very scary disease. It's called Charles Bonnet syndrome. And I think it's a show that I definitely will look into in the future, because I think a lot of people do not know about this condition, which can be caused by cataracts. It can be caused by glaucoma, but it can also be caused by other issues as well. It's a very, very scary. So obviously my mum is 89. She's trying to struggle to walk and hear and see. So a lot of the time we are running between the two. So to be here tonight was very important, and to do the show, especially about something that means a lot to me. I always feel, I mean, I know Val always says that she feels that she was on the Titanic. I absolutely always feel like I was on the Titanic as well. I probably went down with it because I wasn't going to leave who I was with. And I've always been scared of drowning and water. And so I don't go on boats. I won't even go on the pier if the sea is in. I am terrified of water. And I've had hypnotherapy and all kinds of work, and none of them have worked. I still can't do it, so who knows. So thanks very much again, guys. I'm going to bring up the music. I look forward to seeing you soon, whether it's on Robertson Robertson, but it will definitely be on Wicked Women. I hope you all have a very, very safe week. Thank you so much for all the support and the love, and it really means a lot. And I must just say this very quickly. I'm sorry if I don't get back to people straight away. Sometimes I'm so tired, I'm crawling into bed incredibly late. And the only time I look at my phone is literally at that moment of going to sleep. And there are times that you just do not want to talk about what's going on because you're so exhausted. So for the people that have left me messages, thank you so much. I will get back to you. And thanks for understanding. I'm desperately trying to find here the music here, because for some reason it's not showing it, which is wonderful. Let's see if I can bring it up here. Talk amongst yourselves for a minute, guys. But yeah, it's a very, very scary condition, and I think a lot of people need to know a lot more about it. How interesting. I cannot find the music. Wow. Let's see. Well, if not, then we're just going to end as it is. Have a great week. Take care of yourself and each other. I'm trying to bring this up. Oh, look, I can press the button and it will take us out. That's brilliant. Lots of love to all of you guys. Mwah. See you next week, and take care of yourselves. Here we go. Let's see if this works. Come on, play. I'm trying to get it to play and it doesn't want to. There's always one way, isn't it? It's just not. I don't know why it's not doing that. How weird is that? It's just not doing it. That is really odd. That's very odd. It's typical, isn't it? It always plays up. So I'm just trying to find it. Where is it gone? Nope, it's not playing up. Don't worry, guys. We're just going to come out of this anyway. Take care, my loves. Mwah. See you soon. Hopefully see you next Sunday. Have a great week and take care. And don't forget, make sure you are wicked. Bye, darling.